So hey, this is a response to Bruce the Monk in one of the comments on one of my videos, and just gonna get to it. So Bruce, thanks for taking the time to comment at length.
Sure. I mostly just wanted to see where you were going and to say it was good to see you online, but I'm glad we had a chance to communicate. It's been too long.
I guess it is upsetting that you didn't take any of the arguments in the videos seriously.
Um, I don't know that I don't know that I've ever said that I didn't take the arguments seriously, in as much as I don't really take philosophy all that seriously anymore. I used to believe that people can argue. We'll get there. I'm pretty sure. I have a feeling we're going to get there.
And I suggest trying out the hypothesis that I actually believe in what I'm saying, that the arguments actually do matter.
Okay, so two statements there. I believe what I'm saying, and I completely agree with you that you believe what you're saying. Okay, almost always. Some of the arguments, some of the category, some of the arguments you make, a handful, a minority of the arguments you make, are so completely logically fallacious. I sometimes wonder whether you're being disingenuous in making them because they sound cool and they sound like a real zinger, or because again you haven't really been running around in the biblical analytical worlds around, and so you're misinterpreting by kind of adopting the narrative of a bubble. And again, that doesn't necessarily need to be disingenuous as much as even groups adopt narratives that aren't necessarily true or the most accurate. But that's not that's such a minority of the cases. I think it was like there were only two or three times when I was watching your videos, and I did watch them all, where I was like, "You're really making that argument? I really would have expected better from you." Because again, for those of you who don't know, I mean, Ben knows that I think he's a very intelligent person, and is very passionate about expressing his beliefs. Because I've always believed that about Ben. And so that's not. And again, I'm not trying to out somebody, but that's the name of the YouTube channels, and so I'm not revealing any personal information in public.
Because they do.
Yeah, to go to the second one though, that it's what matters, and this is what's fundamentally changed what I was trying to explain. To go to it, I used to study. I used to study. I used to study philosophy and rhetoric and arguments a lot because I used to think that arguments worked. Uh, when I was in my 20s, I thought arguments worked. When I was in my early 30s, I thought arguments worked. My experience since then has really changed. I no longer really believe that you can argue someone out of their position because I don't believe that most people hold a position based on intellectual processes. My experience, in general, 90+% of all positions are based on some kind of emotional basis, and then the rhetoric and the logic comes after. A really good example of this would be the original Volkswagen Bug commercial. The VW Bug is probably one of the best engineered cars in terms of popular transportation ever put out, and the Volkswagen people originally made this huge list of reasons why it was the best engineered car ever, which is why you should buy it, and they didn't sell any. They dropped the intellect, put a mostly naked person on the car, leaning against it, and their sales took off because intellectual arguments don't persuade 90% of the people. Now, I will say as a caveat that of people who do intellectual processing, I would put Ben in the 10%, but there's something more fundamental. When we're talking about belief and not belief, which is the subject of the three videos that I watched, I don't believe that anybody reaches atheism primarily because of a philosophical or intellectual point. I've never experienced it. Moreover, in my worldview, and again, I'm not a philosopher. I'm a monk. So if you hear, my beliefs and my worldviews being heavily informed by the Judeo-Christian scriptures, no offense is meant, but if I'm going to be honestly expressing myself, since that's the fundamental norm of my worldview, that's what I'm going to come out with. And so here's the passage which I have internalized a lot more since even 10 years ago, and even 5 years ago, and definitely more than when we were hanging out as friends, which is 25 years ago almost. So this is an old friend. This is somebody who I've cared about for a long time. And that is James 1, 14 through 15, talking about why people reach a state of unbelief. But each person is tempted when he's lured and enticed by his own desires. Then desire, when it is conceived, gives birth to sin, and death its birth to sin, and sin, when it is fully grown, brings forth death. And again, not just talking about physical death, because we all sin, therefore we all perish, but talking also about death in the New Testament terms, in the terms that Jesus has used, that those who do not believe, do not have access to faith, do not have access then by through that faith to grace, and they're dead in their trespasses and sins. And this is not an attack on Ben. This is all of humanity. I and myself do not believe that I have the intellectual power or inclination to do it. Again, to go again. This goes back to Romans 8:7. For the mind that is set on the flesh is hostile to God, for it does not submit to God's law. Indeed, it cannot. So, and the Greek there is oudunomos, does not have the power to do so. So, I've given up trying to argue people into the Christian faith, because I don't believe that argument produces it. I was listening to a lecture by Dr. Peter Kraft just the other day, and he was talking about that he knew 3 separate atheists who had become Christians by listening to a beautiful piece of orchestral music. And there was so much beauty apparently in the piece of orchestral music that they were convinced there had to be some higher purpose or higher meaning to life, that couldn't all just be random sound, and they became Christians. I don't know. I didn't testify this. I'm just saying. And in my life, honestly, I do a lot of prison ministry. I spend a lot of time associating with criminals, and I've never experienced anyone. No one's ever disproven these 2 statements for me. I've never, of the people whose stories I've known, I've never encountered somebody who went intellect, then emotion, then activity. It is always, always, always in life, and this is everybody. This isn't a personal attack on Ben. I'm describing myself when I screw up. When I don't live away in accordance with the Judeo-Christian worldview. Okay, to be value neutral-ish here, that is always desire, activity, and then the intellectual stuff comes third. It's the rationalization, right? And so doesn't mean that the thoughts aren't real, or the thoughts didn't happen, or the positions aren't adopted. I've got no beef with any of that. It is that I don't think it is the seat of agency, which is a fancy way of saying I don't think it's the engine that drives the car of an unbelieving life. That's just my worldview, and because that is my worldview, I stopped pouring so much of my limited time and energy into studying philosophy, and that was my excuse to Ben for why I have not familiar with the branch of argument that his 3rd video was on. That was my intent. People are limited and fallible, and this got miscommunicated as personal attack, and I have a feeling that when we're gonna, I don't know. I'm hoping we don't see that this doesn't get more offended by me. But this was my initial position. That was my intent. And the difficulty of conveying this, in typing speed, where you can't see me, can't hear my voice, is one of the reasons why I'm making a review video instead of going to bed, which I really want to do.